Israel's ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer. He will be interviewed by senior defense correspondent for Israel's Channel 10, Alon Ben David.
Good afternoon. We're the dessert, so we'll try to be sweet.
Looks like there's a few people who are hungry.
Yeah, seems like it. Well, you're now a veteran ambassador to the US. What has it been? More than 5 years now?
It's over 5. It's in my 6th year, which is, I think, the longest in 50 years.
And a local, we should say, Miami Beach.
A local, yes.
Now, I don't think there's been any Israeli ambassador to the US who enjoyed such a friend at the White House.
Well, you heard the vice president say it when he spoke here on Friday, and I said it myself a few months ago that there's never been a president who's been more an administration, not just a president, who's been more supportive of Israel than the Trump administration. But I hope people here also saw that there is strong support on both sides of the aisle with the strong statements that were made by the two leaders of the Democratic Party, which are deeply, deeply appreciated.
Now, you were quoted once as saying in Wharton, I think, that you would like to be Trump's apprentice. You still want to?
Well, I read a book that he wrote when I was 15 called The Art of the Deal, and he said that Wharton was the best business school in America. He's usually a person of great understatement, but he said it was the best business school in America, so that's why I ended up there. And yeah, it's a good connection to have with the current president.
Well, now, earlier this year, we read a story at the New Yorker, which you thought was lengthy, but I found very interesting, that details how you recognized the potential in Trump and basically kind of educated him and his team about the Middle East. How much is Israel's influence and leverage on American policy vis-a-vis the Middle East?
Well, I wouldn't say that we educated them. I think he had pretty strong views about the major issues we face, even before I had the opportunity to meet him for the first time. We actually met him for the first time during the campaign with Prime Minister Netanyahu at the UN when he came in September 2016, when he was in the candidate. And early on in his campaign, he said he was going to withdraw from the nuclear deal with Iran, which he did, thankfully. And he said he was going to move the embassy to Jerusalem, which he did, thankfully. And he said he was going to provide very strong support for Israel at the United Nations, which he and his fantastic ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, has done. And so, you know, we do outreach to both sides of the aisle, and during the campaign, we were reaching out to both campaigns, and I have to say that President Trump did exactly what he was going to say.
Seems to me like you're being modest.
And we're very grateful for it. What?
Seems to me like you're being modest.
Get used to it.
Okay, so among many things, Trump corrected 2 very long wrongs of the embassy not being in Jerusalem and the Iran deal, which most of the Israelis consider to be a disgraceful deal. Where do we go from here? What do we want? A regime change in Iran? A deal version 2?
Well, first, I think it's important to remember why the deal was such a problem. You know, a lot of people think that the problem with the deal was that it wasn't broad enough. It didn't include Iran's missiles, it didn't include its regional activities, its terrorism. And that's true, it didn't include any of those things. But the main problem with the deal was it didn't do what it said it was going to do, which is to actually block Iran from developing nuclear weapons. This deal actually puts temporary constraints on Iran for 10 to 15 years, and those constraints are automatically removed in a few years.
So where to from now?
And, well, the first thing is, he is putting enormous economic pressure on Iran right now. You know, when he withdrew, that definitely deserves a round of applause. When he withdrew from the deal, a lot of people said you know, if you withdraw on your own, you're never going to be able to get international force behind the sanctions. That's totally false. And we believe that then. Because he has been willing to basically force companies to choose, do business with a $21 trillion economy or a $400 billion economy, or do business with a country that accounts for 50% of global capital flows, or an economy that's irrelevant in terms of global capital, he has actually put the U.S. economy, he's used the force and leverage of the U.S. economy to effect a change. So even if the political class in Europe is still wedded to the deal, British airlines leave, French oil companies leave, German banks leave, everybody is leaving Iran because they don't want to be subject to U.S. sanctions. And we are deeply grateful. I want everybody here to understand what that means, because a lot of people focus on the $50 billion or $100 billion that was given Iran when the deal was signed. That was the signing bonus. That was the small money. Every year under this deal, Iran gets tens of billions, and depending on the price of oil, it could be as much as $100 billion a year, because it's able to export oil. What Trump has done, what President Trump and his administration has done, it has starved this regime of tens of billions of dollars every year that would be used to fuel Iran's war machine in the Middle East. So you asked me where to go from here. We have said, as you know, because you follow this very closely, the Prime Minister has said for 20 years that the only way to peacefully deal with the issue of Iran is to have a combination of a credible military threat and crippling sanctions. Well, we have the crippling sanctions, and I think they're going to get even stronger. And what we have to do is bring them to a point where Iran understands that they need to change their behavior. The policy of the United States is not regime change in Iran. It's to change the behavior. But only if Iran believes that its regime could potentially collapse will you see them being willing actually to abandon their nuclear program. Before that, they will not do it. Only if they feel there's a threat of a collapse of a regime will they do it. And to do that, you need crippling sanctions, and we're on our way to getting there.
But if we are honest, the deal that the Obama administration signed, as disgraceful as it was, provided us, Israel, something that we cannot achieve ourselves. 10 years deferring the nuclear program. Our Air Force can destroy Iranian nuclear facilities tomorrow. That would delay them perhaps in 2 years. We cannot take away the knowledge that they've accumulated in Iran. They know how to enrich uranium. They know how to design a bomb. So we need to create a formula which would not make it worthwhile for them to continue pursuing a bomb. The question is, are we helping the U.S. to draft nuclear deal 2.0?
I don't agree with your assessment. I want everyone here to understand that under this nuclear deal with Iran, Iran's program is not frozen. Iran's program is not frozen today. They are advancing and doing research and development on advanced centrifuges. The knowledge is irrelevant. If you could take the top 100 nuclear scientists of Iran and you put them on a desert island without centrifuges or uranium, they cannot make a nuclear bomb. What's important is the ability to enrich uranium. Right now, under this deal, what Iran is asked to do, and what they were asked to do, is basically mothball old technology while they continue to build new technology, new centrifuges under this deal. Iran's nuclear weapons program is advancing under this deal. They are also developing ballistic missiles. You just saw a couple days ago the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, condemned Iran, rightfully, for test firing of ballistic missiles. You build a nuclear weapon, as you know, ballistic missiles, uranium enrichment, and weaponization. You saw the atomic archive that was revealed. You saw how advanced their weaponization program is. What Iran is doing under this deal is they want to put all those elements in place, not in 2 years, but in 10 years to 15 years when all of these restrictions are removed. So this deal is an unmitigated disaster for Israel, and I'm so grateful that the President of the United States made the decision to walk away from this deal and to ratchet up sanctions on Iran. In my view, I know something a little bit about the U.S.-Israel relationship. In my view, it is the single most important decision an American president has made for the security of the state of Israel in U.S.-Israeli history. The single most important decision.
Since Truman, or even more than that?
Since Truman. When Truman made his decision to recognize the state of Israel in 11 minutes, there were many other leaders who followed right after. In 1973, Nixon made a decision to rearm Israel during the Yom Kippur War. But Nixon wasn't leading that decision. In a certain way, a lot of other people pushed Nixon into making this decision. Ultimately, as president, he did the right thing. When Trump makes his decision to walk away from the deal, he had every world leader, except for Israel and the Arab states. And look, what do we know about it? We just live there. But all the other leaders were telling him not to do it, and senior people within his administration were telling him not to do it. So the courage it takes to stand up to all of that pressure and to do the right thing and to starve a regime that openly calls for the destruction of Israel, that actively works for the destruction of Israel, to starve that regime of hundreds of billions of dollars is the single most important decision a president of the United States has made.
So parallel to that, we are engaged in a campaign which is no longer clandestine against Iranian entrenchment in Syria. The US, despite declaring its will to withdraw from Syria, is maintaining its presence in the Tanef circle. Do we have a pledge that the US would not withdraw from Syria until the Iranians would leave?
They have said so openly. What's happening in Syria is you have three things working together. One is you have the U.S. presence in Tanef, which you talk about, which was not clear to a lot of people 6 months ago, but they have since made it clear that they're not going to walk out of Syria and simply cede that important strategic territory to the Iranians. The second thing that you have is you have the enormous economic pressures, which can potentially force Iran to think about the cost-benefit calculation. Does it pay for them to keep investing in this failed strategy in Syria? And the third thing you have is Israeli action that we've taken, has publicly been reported now, over 200 strikes to prevent Iran from entrenching itself militarily in Syria. So when you have the U.S. there, when you have Israeli action, and when you have U.S. economic pressure, it might lead to a reassessment on the part of the Iranians if this is worth it. Now, as to whether the U.S. is giving us backing, they've been very clear about backing Israel's right to defend itself, and they're very clear not just in word, but also in deed. Churchill once said to Roosevelt, "Give us the tools, and we'll do the job." It's the same thing here. They give us the tools that we need in order to do the job, and we are very grateful for that as well.
Estimates are that for reconstructing Syria, that would require a minimum of $300 billion, which is a sum that only the U.S. have. Do you see the U.S. taking a role in reconstructing Syria?
I don't think they're going to do any reconstruction until they achieve their political objectives, which is to get Iran out of Syria. I don't think they're going to get any reconstruction money.
And now that we are caught in straits vis-a-vis the Russians in Syria, can the U.S. help us get out of the crisis that we're in vis-a-vis the Russians?
Well, I don't know if I would call it a crisis. I think the most important thing, as you know, is to maintain Israel's freedom of operation in Syria. And I think the Prime Minister of Israel has been very clear that he intends to enforce his red lines in Syria. He has enforced them many times. And since this unfortunate incident with the Russian plane, the downing of the Russian plane, he has also made it clear to the leader of Russia, to the United States, to everyone else, that we will continue to do whatever we have to do to defend our citizens, and I believe that will come with the full and complete backing of the United States of America.
So they are signaling us to complete, but I cannot avoid one last question. We are all expecting the deal of the century. Now, as a person that was described as the one that designs American policy in the region, what's in it?
We'll have to wait and see. I hope that it will be something that takes into account Israel's vital security interests, and I believe it will take into account Israel's
when
vital...
When will it be presented?
I don't know when it will be presented because...
Do we prefer to have it before the elections or after?
Look, there are so many different moving parts. What I think their focus is, the U.S. administration, is they know that, you only have one chance to make a first impression. A lot of times you only have one chance to get a peace initiative right. And there are a lot of moving parts in the Middle East.
He doesn't even call it a peace initiative. It's a deal.
Well, part of the moving parts is, I think one thing that is new is that the Arab world, for the first time in Israel's history, understands that Israel is not an enemy, but a potential ally in confronting common dangers. I think that's something new. You recently had a situation in the Gulf that has complicated that lately over the last couple of months. You had an issue in Gaza as you know, a few weeks ago, what it could have escalated. And we're appreciative at the efforts of everybody in order to de-escalate that. You've seen the efforts of the UN, you saw the efforts of the Egyptians, and of course even the Qataris who have put money into it, which we're appreciative of, in Gaza. And so there's a lot of efforts there, and they have to take into account everything, and I think they want to make sure that they get it right. And if they have to wait a few more months to do it, I just think they're going to try to do everything they can when they put the initiative to give it the greatest possibility of success.
With the deal in the background, would you say it's an Israeli interest to secure Trump's re-election for another term?
You're not going to have me wade into the American political debate. Look, I think part of the problem that you see is people trying to drag Israel into America's political debate. We have been blessed to have, decade after decade, for 7 decades, strong bipartisan support for Israel. I thought what you heard today, from today on Sunday and on Friday, the Vice President of the United States, now you have the 2 leading figures in the Democratic Party, should all give people a lot of confidence that the bipartisan support for Israel is going to continue. And I think we should all feel very grateful for that. I do want to say one thing. This is the Israeli-American Council, and I'm very grateful for all the work that you do. And I'm also the son of a Sabra, mother, and an American father. My mother was born in pre-state Israel in Gedera, and my father was born in New York. And today, in the audience, I think he's still here because he wouldn't walk out before his nephew spoke. Today, right here, is my mother's brother, my Uncle Jack, who was born in Gedera, who tomorrow will be 80 years old. So please wish him a happy birthday.
Ambassador Dermer.
And who served in the American Army on behalf of the United States. So thank you for your service, and thank you all for everything you do to strengthen the great alliance between Israel and America. That alliance is going to get even stronger in the future, thanks to you and many others who are working to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Dermer. Thank you all. Chanukah Sameach, and שיהיו חדשות טובות.